guys, check out another amazing clip when Kenny interviewed Steve Morris.
Consequently, the saloon doors of real estate are back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because a lot of people don't have the constitution to rack and stack enough listings and deal with enough buyers to make it work on a regular basis. And the gaps are what kills the real estate agent. So could we fill in the gaps? So what it came down to is this. And I took the numbers right to the top level because when I introduced the idea, I was broke. I didn't have a nickel. The idea was there. I was trained up at that point. I had 20 years of experience. I had the idea. I'd worked on it in my head. I threw thousands of people's pieces of paper in the garbage, working this thing out. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. This works. This works. This works. And I took the numbers right to the top level as far as you could do without blowing the brains out of the broker. It had to make good common sense because I need clearance with the accountants. I need clearance with the lawyers. If it doesn't make sense, they'll throw it right in the garbage. Now I had something going for me. It was this. It had to do with the definition of independent contractor status. This is why it's legal. And this is why it's so difficult for anybody to duplicate this system is this. An independent contractor is allowed to have more than one job. Now, the definition between Canada and the United States is a little bit different with regard to independent contractors, but it still holds true. So what I set up was a system whereby if it's dues and fees and it comes off the broker's side of the paycheck, and it's forwarded to head office is not in the real estate business, and all the big operations, their head office is not in the real estate business. Their brokerages are, but they're not. We're outside the industry. So if I collect dues and fees from the broker on the closing of the transaction, it comes through me. It leaves the industry, loops through me, and I simply pay it back to the person who sponsored in the agent, who generated the deal in the first place, and that loop makes it legal. It also made it almost non-duplicatable from the standpoint of other brokerages. In other words, if they didn't completely convert their entire operation over, they couldn't do it. It would be coming off the trade record sheet. That would be illegal.
Right.
So there's never been a court case. Never been a court case on this because it's totally legal. And I knew that. So we put it together that way, and we're starting from scratch, so it was easy for us to do that. But any company that had been out there that had muscle and had been there for years and years and years to convert their whole operation to try to duplicate me, everybody says they're going to duplicate you, they're going to duplicate. No, they're not. It took us 20 years to convince everybody that nobody was going to follow us along this line because they simply couldn't do it. So we're sort of a one-kind, invitation-only type of company whereby the agents on the street have a benefit, and I'll talk about what that is, a benefit with regard to bringing in agents into the company, but not just for your own office. It's not tailored that way. It's with centralized control. We put in a system, and the high-tech systems of today made it possible to do this. Years and years and years ago, you'd never be able to do this, but today we could. We put in a system whereby if John introduces Mary into the company, now, she could work right across the street. Okay, fine and dandy. But he's got the listing, she's got the buyer, and they put it together and everything else. And he puts the idea in her head, to maybe come and talk to the management and talk about this idea of exit. And if she listens to the story and finds it very enticing and so on and so forth, here's her benefit. If she signs up with him, and that's what the broker's job is, to sign her up and process the paperwork and everything else. Okay, she's now an agent on our team now. She wasn't before. John sponsored her in. He introduced her. That's the sponsoring process. Now, as she puts transactions together and those transactions close, he gets an amount equivalent to 10% of the gross of that transaction, up to a maximum of $10,000 a year for as long as she stays with the company. That's perpetual, as long as she stays with the company. Now, if she was a good producer, and let's just say that good producers are over $100,000 a year, let's just take that position. That's and 10% is 10% of $100,000 is $10,000. So there's $10,000 as her transactions close. It's real money, not multi-level marketing. Doesn't work. I went down that path. I worked it out, threw it in the garbage, and I said, no, we're not going to do multi-level marketing. We're going to stay single level because it has to be real money. It can't be so cloudy nobody can figure it out. You've got to be able to figure this out. It's got to be straight and simple.
So what you're telling me You're telling me one person can make me $10,000 a year. If I bring in 10 people, I'm going to make $1 million.
Yeah.
Over 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years, $1 million. And that's all based on other people's energies, running around the snow and the wind and the rain, putting transactions together. All you did was introduce them. Now, you have no obligation with regard to that after that. You never have to speak to that person ever again. But if you did, and you encourage them, and say they weren't that much of a top producer and they're maybe making $60,000 a year, but if you pass down a little wisdom to that person and help them out, and this is, see, we're tapping into the top producers' energies now. Now the top producers have a reason to pass down their wisdom to another person because they can duplicate, multiply, or clone themselves by replacing themselves with people that they bump into on a daily basis because they're people. They're out there all the time. And create leverage where they never had leverage before. Real estate agents have no leverage. There's your problem. Well, what happens when you get to the point where you sit there and say, well, eventually I'm going to retire. You've got the leverage over a distance of time